Welcome to 1010 Wins Winning Women. I'm Susan Richard, talking to women who are using their lives to make a difference in the lives of others. Recently, I began doing some personal research to find out more about my family's escape from Greece during the Holocaust. And in a very short amount of time, Googling around online, I discovered that my father, grandparents, and great-grandparents were among 982 refugees brought to this country as part of an historic voyage in the summer of 1944. I also met a woman without whom I probably wouldn't be here today. Her name is Ruth Gruber. Ruth Gruber was born in Brooklyn in 1911. She made history at the age of 20 as the youngest person in the world to earn a PhD, and the first to write a doctoral thesis on Virginia Woolf, whose writing, she says, had a tremendous influence.
It gave me the courage to write as a woman, to react as a woman, to have the courage to live as a woman. And when I became a journalist, I don't believe there's objectivity. We are the sum total of our past. And having really learned from Virginia Woolf, I could be a journalist who had the courage to write as a woman.
At 23, while writing for the New York Herald Tribune, Ruth Gruber became the first journalist to report from the Soviet Arctic. In 1944, she was working for the Department of the Interior when, in response to a scathing report from the Treasury Department titled "The Acquiescence of This Government in the Murder of Jews," President Roosevelt announced that 1,000 refugees would be brought to the United States as guests of this country.
As soon as I read it in the Washington Post that President Roosevelt had opened our doors and that we were going to take in 1,000 refugees, I made an appointment to see my boss, Harold Ickes, the Secretary of the Interior, and I said to him, somebody has to go over and hold their hand. These people are going to be terrified. Look what they've given up, their country, their land, their language. They'll be terrified. They don't know what's ahead. Somebody has to fly over. And he said, you're right. I'm going to send you.
And what did you think?
I hoped he didn't see my knees shaking. I said, Mr. Secretary, this is the most important assignment of my life.
You knew that at that moment.
I knew it.
The transport ship, the Henry Gibbons, sailed out of Naples, Italy in July of 1944, carrying 982 refugees out of 3,000 who applied, along with almost the same number of wounded American soldiers. The refugees, most of whom were Jewish, were to be given safe haven at Fort Ontario and Oswego, New York. The story is chronicled in Ruth Gruber's book, Haven, which in 2001 was dramatized in a CBS miniseries starring Natasha Richardson, with a cameo by Ruth herself, and a Los Angeles stage production titled Haven the Musical. When you arrived in Naples, the refugees had already been chosen. How were they selected?
The first criteria, and there were many criteria. In fact, the man who first chose them had a nervous breakdown and said, I can't go on playing God. And they had to send several people over to make the selection. The first criteria was, wherever possible, people who have been in concentration camps, in slave labor camps, in death camps, and managed somehow to get out. So that was the first choice. The second choice was keep families together. But if there is a man, a young man of military age, a family will not be allowed to come on. The third, or one of the other criteria, was anyone with a communicable or odious disease. I don't know any disease more odious than a common cold where you go around blowing. But they were very cautious about diseases. And one of the major ones was somebody who could help run the camp.
Not only were the refugees all made to sign a document that said they would return to Europe after the war ended, because they had no legal status, they were each given a tag to wear around their necks that classified them as casual baggage.
And the musical Haven the best song in the whole musical is They Call Us Casual Baggage.
Casual baggage, yes, the people will see. I'm not baggage, not garbage, I'm a person, I'm someone I meet.
The voyage wasn't all smooth sailing. There were some frightening moments on board the ship. Tell me about that.
At one point, 30 Nazi planes, a whole armada, flew over us. Word came immediately, everyone to their bunks. And I went down to the bow of the ship, the hold, with the 982 refugees. I prefer to call them 1,000. There's something poetic about the word 1,000. 1,000 were lying on their bunks silently. They had been through so much, they could go through this. Many were scared, but they were silent. Even babies were silent, as if they knew this was a moment to be very silent. So then I went to the stern, the back of the ship, and that was a different picture. There were the wounded soldiers with their legs bandaged, with their arms bandaged, with prostheses, with their heads bandaged, and some of them, when I came down, yelled at me, "We didn't die in Casablanca, we didn't die in Tunisia, we didn't die in Algiers, we didn't die in Libya, and we're going to die here in this because of the lousy Jews, and they know it." How Nazi planes would know that we had Jews, I don't know, but some were hysterical. And I took a Red Cross worker, Abe Tauber, with me, and he said, "Wait a minute, guys. Let her tell you who some of these Jews are." And I began to tell them who they were and what they had gone through. And little by little, the hysteria lessened. And then one of the soldiers called out, "I'm a Jew, and I tell you I'm very happy that we're on this ship, and I'm very proud of what you're doing." And then some applauded. And we got them calmed, and for some reason, miracles, the 30 planes flew over.
The attitude of the soldiers would soon change when some of the refugees put on a show.
We had the premier baritone of the Zagreb National Opera. He could sing Figaro so that the walls would come at you. Figaro, well, they were, they applauded madly. And then we brought out some of our young women singing songs. Well, you should have heard those soldiers. Wow, look at that tomato. Hubba, hubba. And they wouldn't let them off. They kept yelling, "More, encore, more." They didn't want to go back to dinner. They wanted those gals singing. It was such a success. And after that, there was no keeping the soldiers away from our gals.
The Henry Gibbons sailed into New York Harbor on August 3rd, 1944.
Somebody called out, "There's the Statue of Liberty." And 1,000 people rushed to one side of the ship. I thought, if that ship doesn't capsize now. One of the old men said to me, "This is the most important day of my life, looking at the Statue of Liberty. Do you know how I've dreamed of this day?" And I said, "It's a very important day in my life, too."